everyone. Welcome to LawWiser's virtual dialogue series on the EV industry, evolution, the future of electric mobility in India. There is a lot of conversation surrounding EV industry in India, with government coming up with new policies and also EV startups reaching and hitting all-time high. The funding in them is hitting all-time high. This is coupled with a huge spike in consumer interest too, due to rising fuel prices and increased demand for clean energy from more discerning consumers. So today we are going to cover a very important aspect of EV sector, which is infrastructure. Welcome to the panel discussion on harnessing infrastructure for the EV sector. What will it take to make EV mainstream in India? For this, we have experts with us. We have Priyakshi Gupta. She's co-founder and editor at evreporter.com, and Darshan Bora. He's partner at Economic Laws Practice. Hi, Priyakshi and Darshan. Welcome on our panel.
Hi, Avni. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Avni. Nice to be on the panel. Thank you.
So starting with the first question, what are some of the biggest infrastructure challenges that you both feel that the adoption of EVs in India today faces?
So in terms of challenges with respect to EV adoption, I would say there are two main challenges. One is definitely the price, and second is the range anxiety and the charging anxiety that comes with it, right? And so because we are talking about the infrastructure related challenges, so I will focus on the charging infrastructure first. So when it comes to charging infrastructure, we need to understand there are different charging requirements for different kinds of consumers. There is home charging, there is destination charging at malls, offices, cinema halls, and then there will be highway charging. And different kind of use cases and customer usage will determine which charging makes sense for them. So in terms of infrastructure challenges, one has to understand that if you want to push electric vehicles, specifically four-wheelers, to beyond early adopters and beyond people who are making use of it commercially, like four-wheeler fleets, if you want to put it to regular you and me, we have to build that confidence that if I'm going to make an intercity trip, I will not run out of charge midway and I'll have options to charge. So that is where the highway charging comes in. And another infrastructural aspect we need to make sure is we can't just put the chargers anywhere we feel, okay, yahan jagah mil gayi, yahan rakh dete hain. We can't do that because the convenience of the end consumer will make a lot of it. It is critical. If I have to go off my way, if it is too much of a detour, it will be very inconvenient. So what I'm saying is the charging infrastructure planning will take a lot of long-term foresight, and it will take, I would say, initially deep pockets, because the return on investment will not be immediate, specifically in the case where you are catering to private ownership, private usage of vehicles. Then the other aspect is where charging is being done for captive fleets. And that is the major consumer of charging these days. As you know, you would see your last mile deliveries being done by a lot of electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers, right? So over there, it makes sense because you have a business operation. There are more aspects, more dynamics in the play. And then the service provider creates a charging infrastructure closer to the hub and also at places where opportunity charging can be provided to your riders and your drivers. Right. So all of these factors, I think, will come into play when we solve infrastructure for EV charging.
I completely agree with Priyachi. So I think cost, as Priyachi also mentioned, cost is, and the pricing of it is a very key aspect. And we've seen this, be it the telecom or the mobile revolution in India. Once a commodity reaches that affordability threshold, then you don't have to do anything else. The market dynamics take care of itself. Currently we are positioned quite well with crude oil prices and petroleum being at lifetime highs and all. So if we can take care of the cost element, so that coupled with what Priyakshu also touched upon, the technological anxiety. Like recently we had situations where on the social media, a lot of talk about EVs catching fire, for example. Okay, so there is a sense of anxiety in the market. If you ask some people in my family also today, and would they want to buy EV, they'll ask about it. Oh, but there were those incidents, so I think that needs to be acted upon very, very fast. There needs to be some kind of a campaign around that. Perhaps the government may take some lead, to spread awareness that it is safe, and there's no need to worry. And ultimately, there needs to be a feeling that, one, it will be good for the environment and good for the country also. So that that education of the masses, I think, is very important. So that will take care of, I think, the technological anxiety. And then of course the charging infra, and those are the other things which need to be there. But again, as Indians, we are very ingenious, right? If you look at the lead battery, for example, okay, even with very limited infrastructure, you have 85% of the lead acid batteries being recycled in India. Okay, and that's all done in the informal sector. So I think once the cost and the technological issues are taken care of, and there is widespread awareness, the infra will definitely come in. And people, once there is a market for it, you will find more companies in that space in providing the infra.
Sure.
Right. And also, Darshan, as you stated, the role of government, in to making these challenges more feasible for public. Can you highlight the role of the authorities at state levels and local levels in enabling a more seamless charging infrastructure in general, and also the importance of bylaws for charging facilities?
Yes, Abhi. So that is something, I'll give you an example. So if you set up a mega industry in any of the state today, if you as a company want to set up a mega industry, you will have all the states lining up in front of you. Some state will say, I'll give you 10% subsidy. The other will say, I'll give you 20% subsidy. You'll be surprised. For example, Tamil Nadu state incentive policy, it gives a subsidy up to 40% in certain cases of the capital cost for certain industries. Okay. Now, if we have, for example, charging infra, a huge upfront cost, if some of the existing incentives which are there for the large industries, even if those incentives were to be extended to the EV industry, and especially the charging infra, related industry, I think it will go a long way. Okay. Another example is neutralizing the GST cost. Okay. So, let's say for setting up charging infra, be it your civil works, be it your, electric works, your, the software investment, what you make, you incur a substantial GST. It is as high as up to 20%, 18 to 20% GST, element is there. If you take away that, and if you are effectively neutralizing that GST cost on the capital investment, you will make it more lucrative by 20%. That itself will bring down the cost by 20%. So you have subsidies or the state incentives, as they call. If you're able to neutralize, GST, that itself will take care of the cost by a very, very high percentage. If you see, the state agencies, they have all their land banks. If they can, get into some kind of a revenue share model and offer the lands which are available, we need, and that's of course been talked about in the Ministry of Power guidelines and the Niti Aayog level also, how we can really harness the land parcels available with the government. We, across all our major roads, we have the oil marketing companies which are largely government owned. They have the retail outlets. Okay, they already, so that we can really leverage those existing, outlets which are there, and try to harness some of those at least for the electric charging infra. I think these are some of the steps which will go a very long way in creating, in ensuring the spread of EVs in India.
Yeah.
And of course, bylaws. If you, for example, Delhi has mandated, a certain percentage of, parking in residential projects now to be EV based. So I think once there, and other states have issued draft guidelines. Once there is a proliferation of such guidelines and bylaws, I think that will definitely go a long way. Because if, let's say, I am moving in a new building, okay, I know that there is EV charging infra there. That will be an incentive for me to buy an EV, right? I don't have to invest in my personal charging points, and on. I know it's available in the building. So I think these bylaws definitely will go a long way in promoting EVs.
Yeah, right, Darshan. Priyakshi, do you want to add anything to it?
I think very relevant points Darshan made. One thing I will add, because you talked about the state, the role of the state. So apart from incentivizing industries and so on, that is definitely all the state governments are looking to do. And they have specific programs to invite startups to invest in in setting up certain industries, including batteries, powertrain, electric vehicle assembly, manufacturing, and all. Uh, Another role, very important, is by state-owned utilities, discoms, and even private discoms as well, who are responsible for the power infrastructure that these charging services will need. So over there also, there is a big opportunity for the state-owned utilities to sort of upgrade themselves, and to the extent that tomorrow, when the proliferation of electric vehicles happen, and there will be a certain impact on the grid because of EV charging. And what I read, I was reading a report by AEEE, and it said that the impact won't be as much about the total increase in load as it will be the peak loads at certain times. Every evening when you and I will reach home from office, we'll plug in our cars, right? So the utilities have to sort of upgrade themselves to be able to handle those new scenarios that will come up, and they have to upgrade to be able to communicate with charging services, charging solution providers, so that it they can be incentives to utilize valleys in the load, and there can be incentives to have people charge at a certain time of the day. And going forward, as and when technology upgrades, we are also talking about vehicle to grid services, where the vehicles can sort of act like a power storage, and at the time of peaks, vehicles can give the energy back to the grid. So there are so many avenues that the electric vehicles, when we have a more evolved ecosystem, that will open up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Priyakshi. That brings me to my next question on discussing a particular policy by government, which is battery swapping policy. So, do you think battery swapping policy is a more feasible alternative in India by giving the EV segment is like a further push? Does it give EV segment a further push? And also, what are the advantages and challenges associated with the policy?
Right. So as you know, the battery swapping policy that has come, it is still in a draft stage, and all the stakeholders are at present, they have been invited a couple of times to put forth their comments. So we don't have the final policy yet, but um, as a um, as a system, battery swapping is very interesting, because to me, it makes a lot of sense for light electric vehicles, for two-wheelers and three-wheelers, specifically where the vehicles are being utilized for a commercial purpose. Because over there, the time is money. If you are using your electric vehicle to sort of make deliveries through the all around the town through the day, if you have to charge your vehicle, let's say in between for 2 hours or 4 hours, that is time lost that you could have actually used to make more deliveries, right? So so that is one aspect. It makes sense in those use cases. Secondly, it drastically improves your chances of acquiring an electric vehicle, because it has the potential to separate the cost of battery from the cost of vehicle. Because once the battery swapping comes in effectively, there will be business models where when I'm purchasing a vehicle, I'm only purchasing the vehicle and not the battery. Battery makes up 30, 35, 40% of the cost, and that is the price premium we are paying when we are buying electric vehicles. So once, if there is a business model that allows somebody to purchase a vehicle, it reduces the capital cost investment initially, and then they can just use it like on a lease. Every time they go and swap a battery from a battery swapping station, they pay a certain amount, and it becomes like how we are refueling our vehicles, right? We don't get all the petrol in the beginning, right? We go every time we go and we fill in the fuel and we go away. So so these are the things that make sense for battery, but I don't think this is for private ownership yet, though there are certain business models like in Taiwan, where Gogoro has also very successfully done it for private ownership of two-wheelers also. But it really depends on a lot of factors, including a very strong policy, including how a different stakeholders in the ecosystem can come together and collaborate. Because if you're talking about battery swapping, it means it needs interoperability. It means it needs standardization. You can't if you want to have a widespread network, then it means that batteries of different companies and batteries going into different vehicles, they sort of might need to collaborate together so that one can take advantage of another's network. So all of that is being discussed in the form of this battery swapping policy that is currently under works. And there will be standardization, there will be methods of collecting data, and so on. So we are people who are following and observing the electric vehicle ecosystem are very keenly actually waiting for the final policy to come out. And the challenge in terms of challenges, this is one challenge, standardization. And another argument that does not work in favor of battery swapping is that it limits innovation, because as soon as you standardize something, it at some point it takes away from an OEM's a freedom to experiment more with it, maybe with the shape, maybe with the size, maybe with certain specifications of the battery. And in the long run, it might impact the speed of innovation with which the EVs and the associated systems will evolve.
Thanks, Priyakshi. Darshan, do you have any comments on battery swapping policy?
Yeah, so it is definitely very lucrative. It will be as good as refilling the car. But I think there are a lot of supply side constraints which also need to be taken care of. Whether there will be enough batteries available. You need to have a spare stock of batteries for effective, effective swapping policy. Whether those batteries in those numbers and in good quality batteries, right? Because a lot of for the people to accept those for swapping their batteries, they need to have the confidence that it is the right kind of battery and it won't result in any kind of damage to their vehicle. Of course, harmonization will go a long way in giving that confidence. But I think some of the supply side constraints, if they are taken care of, then definitely battery swapping seems to be very, very lucrative.
Okay. So coming from battery swapping to battery recycling now. So in India, where the raw materials for battery production hardly exist, what is the role of batteries recycling? What role it's going to play in India? And are recycling mandates by the government imposed on automobile manufacturers is going to play a very crucial part?
Right. I think that's a very, very important aspect, that is the recycling of battery. See, for a country like India, or be that in any country for that matter, I don't think so it's an option, recycling. It is an imperative, okay? There are various factors why it is an imperative. One is the availability of some of the rare metals which go into the, go into the battery. We are largely import dependent on that, be it nickel, cobalt, for example. They are available in very few countries, Russia being one of the suppliers, and there are uncertainties around, a stable supply of those metals, a scarcity of metals. Also, fundamentally, it has a limited, life, the lithium ion battery, for example. So, that makes it imperative that we look at ways how we can, reuse it. Okay. And see, technologically also, let's say if there is a battery which has been used for automobile for a few years and it is no longer supporting that automotive, it can be put to secondary applications. Okay. So that, the ease with which it can be used for, secondary applications, I think will mean that more and more, people do recycle the batteries and put it to secondary use. uh, you know the environmental hazards, for example, if we don't recycle the batteries, you have the risk of all these, metals, harmful metals and chemicals coming into our food chain. For example, in India, if you see, half of the garbage ends up being burnt. If somebody, if these batteries are burned and, it's not handled properly, you will have toxic fumes into the environment. If it goes into the soil, and if it enters the food chain, you will have all kind of health issues in the population. So the environmental aspects, the economical aspects, okay, and the technological aspects, the fact that it can be recycled for secondary applications, I think all of these mean that it is an imperative. Recycling has to be done. And of course, we will have mandates from the government. We had, the draft battery waste management regulations in 2019, which have been issued, which puts responsibility on all the stakeholders, be it manufacturers, the importers, to recycle the batteries. Those have not been effectuated. I think it will evolve over a period of time. But definitely, you will have recycling mandates, whether only on automobile manufacturers, that remains to be seen, because as I said, some of the batteries, they can be put to secondary uses. So there needs to be much more broad based policy for recycling of batteries.
Priyakshi, do you want to add something on battery recycling?
I think Darshan covered it really well. The battery waste management rules, the draft was out around 2 years ago, and the final version has still not come. And I know for sure that the work is being done. There are leaders in the industry who are managing e-waste companies and automotive companies. They are all involved in that discussion. So producer responsibility is going to be very important, and we also need to make sure that the end consumers also start asking these questions when they are buying an electric vehicle, because the government is one big reason government is pushing electric vehicles so much, promoting it so much, is in the larger environmental interest. And if at the end of it we end up polluting our groundwater, we end up putting these batteries into landfills, we are not really meeting the purpose that we started with in the first place, right? So definitely urban mining, as we say, in India, because we can't do real mining of lithium, we don't have the stocks, we don't have nickel and cobalt. So but this urban mining, where you take a spent battery and technologically you try to extract the raw minerals that went into making that battery. So uh, there are a lot of state policies also that are encouraging companies to start such operations, and there are companies who have taken some lead into it. But yes, I think a lot more focus is needed to, because we, as soon as these first life batteries start coming out of the electric vehicles, we will see a deluge of this e-waste being generated. So, and then it will be because the EVs are picking up, it will be a continuous process, right? Every year, every month you will have. So not just the producer, even dealers, or maybe in energy companies, battery swapping operators, because if we are if we go back to battery swapping, there could be business model where one company takes the ownership of the batteries, and users are only using it like on lease, right? So this company that is sitting at the center, who has the ownership of batteries, is in a more organized space to handle the end of life batteries better. So basically, overall life cycle management of batteries will be important. And also, given that now the government is also focusing on promoting cell manufacturing in India. So if we are going to manufacture cells and we are going to import everything from outside, it is very important to ascertain how much of that raw material demand will we be able to meet via urban mining. So all of these things need to be studied, and answers need to be given.
Thank you for sharing. Lastly, I just wanted to ask that, like, there is a lot of conversation surrounding EV in the country, but what will it take, or how long it will take to make EV mainstream in India? Like, if you both can make a closing remark on EV in India and how long it will take to become mainstream.
Yeah, I think the cost, as I said, is going to be the key. Moment you have a cost advantage in using an EV, I think that is the time you will really see mass migration from traditional vehicles to EV vehicles. So cost is definitely going to be the key, and also the other aspects of infrastructure and the technological issues being taken care of. Once they're in place, I think we will definitely. I would put it like somewhere around 2 to 3 years when really we could see people migrating to EVs in large numbers.
Right. I think so. Yes, the cost is the biggest factor because as soon as things start making sense economically, you don't have to promote it. You don't have to push it. People will anyways flock to it. So what I think is it will happen in stages for different vehicle segments. So for three-wheelers, last month was the first month ever where we sold more electric three-wheelers than ICE three-wheelers. So in case of three-wheelers, because three-wheelers are mostly used for commercial activities where the asset utilization is very high. So their operating cost matters a lot, right? So in three-wheelers, it is already making sense. In two-wheelers, we are still at 4 to 5% of every monthly we are, because we sell lakhs and lakhs of two-wheelers every month, and only 4 to 5% are being sold as electric. But uh, that is picking up. There was some setback due to the fire issues, like Darshan also pointed out recently. But I think the government is looking at being strict about the safety concerns, being strict about the safety regulations. So in my opinion, it will happen. Three-wheelers will sort of move first very quickly. By the end of this year, you will see majority being sold as electric. It's already last month onwards, you already started it. Two-wheelers next. And I think the four-wheelers, in case of four-wheelers, you need more options also now. In company, if you tomorrow go and buy, you have very limited options today. So it will be three-wheelers, two-wheelers in next 2 to 3 years, and then four-wheelers, of course.
So thank you so much for being part of this video, and it was our pleasure to have you on this panel.
Thank you for having us on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.